let's get started. And just now, both the manager and I washed our hands. It's always good to keep your hands clean or use hand sanitizer before touching your face. It's best to keep them clean.
Now, if we take a look at the model's skin tone, it's a bit dull in some areas, but overall her skin isn't that dark, right? It just looks that way because her skin is a bit prone to breakouts, but if you look only at her neck, her skin isn't actually that dark. So we're going to brighten her complexion to match the tone of her neck, because even for men, having a brighter complexion on stage looks better, so we'll lighten the tone a bit. And since there are some blemishes, we'll apply the base a bit thicker so that the blemishes don't show under the stage lights and the makeup stays well. That's how I'll do the base. The model has already groomed his eyebrows well, so honestly, there's not much to tidy up right now. As I draw them in, if needed, I'll tidy up a strand or two. Now, if there are some blemishes, it usually means there's a lot of oiliness. So in this case, you can wipe the face once with cleansing water or wash it and then start again. I'll wipe the face twice with toner before starting. If you completely remove that smooth oiliness before applying makeup, the base will last longer. For skincare, always apply it all the way down to under the chin. That's because this is where the shading goes, and if this area is dry, the shading will look patchy. But when dealing with acne-prone skin, you have to be careful. Those who have breakouts will know that dead skin tends to flake up around the blemishes. So because the flakiness can really stand out, you need to press the base in as much as possible while applying it. When applying skincare or choosing a product, you should pick a foundation that has a bit of stickiness or some weight to it.
And actually, for skin with breakouts or that feels hot, sometimes we do a mask during the skincare step. But that depends on the time and situation.
There are people whose faces get really hot when something gets close to their skin like this. In that case, makeup tends to wear off much faster than you'd expect. That's why you really need to make sure your skincare is well absorbed. When it feels like I need to apply a lot more skincare, since my hands are also quite warm, it's better to use a moist latex sponge because it's cool and hydrating. It's better to use something cold, like a latex sponge, to apply the product. Since both the skin and my hands are warm, and these days, even men are wearing as much makeup as women do. Even so, since men still wear less makeup than women, they often don't apply false eyelashes. Of course, there are people who do, but at least for today, I won't be applying them. Since the overall makeup is lighter, I think it's important to define the facial contours well. And I think men look more attractive when their facial angles are defined. So from the base stage, I'll be using both a darker and a lighter foundation. But since the model's neck is actually quite light, I don't think I should go too dark.
Right now, instead of the moist latex I used earlier, I'm using a dry latex like Mitsuyoshi or Mustaev, which helps the product adhere more closely to the skin.
And if you look closely at the model right now, you'll notice she has a lot of fine facial hair. For skin with a lot of fine hair or that is prone to trouble and has a lot of dead skin, if you brush back and forth too much, it can actually make it worse. So it's better to brush only in the direction of the grain and then pat it in with a latex sponge like this. Pressing it in is better. First, I'll press it in once with Mitsuyoshi, apply the base as the first layer, and then finish the base with a soft latex sponge. Since there's quite a bit of fine hair and some flaky skin from breakouts, the soft latex sponge is used at the end to press everything in. I don't really have much facial hair, but this area is a bit bluish. So I'm going to cover the philtrum area with a darker shade just once as well, because this area needs to be covered separately.
The reason I use a darker shade is because sometimes when you're watching dramas with your family, you might notice that men's beards can look bluish. If you cover it with a light shade instead of a dark one, rather than actually covering it, the blue tint can end up standing out even more. Using the same dark foundation that was applied to the outer areas, I'm going to cover the beard area as a first step. If you used a darker foundation on the outer edges to define the contours, now use a slightly lighter foundation and with a dry latex sponge apply it more firmly, focusing on the inner area. You mentioned applying it thickly, but you're actually putting it on in thin layers.
The model's skin right now doesn't have a grayish tone, so it's fine, but some men have quite dull skin. If you make their skin too bright for the stage, they can end up looking grayish. Their face ends up looking like it's floating separately. So for people like that, it's better to use a base with a slightly yellow undertone, or like I just did, use foundation to define the contours and gradually brighten the face toward the front. That way, the grayish tone is more neutralized. I can't show you that today, but you just need to take the skin type into careful consideration when you do it. You shouldn't just think because they're an idol, their face has to be super white. For men, the makeup process often finishes relatively quickly. Depending on the concept, sometimes it actually takes longer than for women, but that's pretty rare. Since it generally finishes a bit faster, when I'm doing men's makeup, I usually complete the base first before starting. I also define the contours because once the contours are set to some extent, everything looks clearer. Honestly, with regular clients, they really want to cover every little thing, but when you're on stage sweating and your makeup is coming off, you can't keep fixing it like that. So I often use a concealer pencil to cover up, or sometimes I just apply it thickly and set it completely by patting it in to fix it in place. If you definitely wipe off underneath and pat in your base, then use a semi-matte foundation like this. You get a really soft, almost velvety base that sticks well to the skin.
It creates a base that feels like it will last a long time, even if you sweat.
Some of you might have tried this already, but there's a product called Sweat Roll. You mean the thing for wiping sweat off your face? They sell it at pharmacies, but I've heard it can have side effects. Honestly, though, among the people I've worked with, quite a few have used it because their sweat would pour down like rain, making it impossible to keep even a semi-matte finish. It's not just a little bit of sweat. Some people sweat so much it looks like they've just washed their face. In those cases, they use Sweat Roll the night before. It definitely helps control oil. I just wanted to let you know that this is another option out there. Since there can be side effects, you should consult with a pharmacist, but it really does make things easier when doing makeup. If you sweat less like that, of course, you shouldn't apply too thickly when covering blemishes, but you do need to put on a moderately thick layer and work quickly. You can't take too long because there's a set out time. Once you finish with shading or powder, it gets fixed in place. If you add a little more concealer on top of that, it lasts longer and covers better. That's because when you apply it on a matte surface, it conceals well. Also, for skin with blemishes, there are often marks left near the ears as well. It's much better if you quickly and roughly check those areas as well. So I just dabbed here to cover it up. And if you gently press with the brush you used, it's easy to match the foundation tone and you can do your base quickly and easily. Oh, and I also lightly cover the dark circles in advance. Personally, I actually like these kinds of dark circles. They make the eyes look deeper, but instead of just leaving them as dark circles, I prefer to cover them lightly and then use some shadow to create a broader look. For men, this gives a sense of depth and looks more attractive. And just like women, men also need to use an eye primer. That's because men also use shadow or other products, and if you sweat or have oily skin, it can smudge. Close your eyes. Just like before, make sure to apply it thoroughly between the lashes and at the outer corners of the eyes. Now we're going to apply eyeshadow, and if you look at the model's eyes, the shape and length are really beautiful. They're beautifully long. I think that's a big advantage, so I'll do the makeup in a way that really highlights that feature. The bone structure is also just right, and the T-zone here is quite pronounced, which gives a masculine vibe. I think a moderately sexy vibe would look great too. Just joking a bit, but I think emphasizing these slightly round and long eyes would be really attractive. When doing makeup for men with monolids like this, the gradient is really important. For women, if you go for a very fine, soft gradient, for men, the gradient is important, but there's also a key color that stands out. You shouldn't overblend the accent color that gives depth to the eyes. Maybe just a medium gradient? If you blend it too much, it might look like it lacks strength, you know? Of course, it depends on the makeup style, but when you want to accentuate the eyes a bit, it's best to think of it like a line and blend it out just enough. It's like when you smudge eyeliner, you only blend it out moderately. That kind of feeling. When your eyes are open, you should still be able to clearly perceive it to approximately this extent, maintaining a comprehensive visual experience. The shadow with this color, this vibrancy, so when your eyes are open, keep that in mind as you apply it. It's the same for men. If you can see any white gaps, the eyes won't look as nice, so make sure to fill in all the spaces thoroughly. And now, when you look at it like this, there are eyes where you need to fill in the waterline and eyes where you don't. But personally, since the skin covers it here, you don't really need to fill it in. And for men, when drawing that line, instead of making it super clean and sharp like for women, it's prettier to just extend the length with a softer look, so I'll do it that way. There are eyes like this one where there's a shadow along the eye shape. In that case, you just need to follow that natural shape as it is, because these eyes themselves are already pretty. If you occasionally want to add some definition to the line, you can just use eyeliner on top to make it a bit more defined, not by making it super sharp or pointed. And if you look here right now, I've slightly opened up the inner corner here. This part is a bit rounder and more open, but I did that so it would look a little longer.
Usually, it's rare for both eyes to be exactly the same. One eyelid crease might be a bit bigger, or one eye might be wider or more open than the other. There are always differences like that. So it's really important to look straight ahead and, for example, open up just one inner corner a bit more. Adjusting your eyes like this is very important.
You know how men's eyes tend to look a bit longer and more rectangular rather than soft, like women's eyes? I think that's what makes them attractive. But this is really just a matter of personal preference. I'll adjust this side a little to match as well. I'm going to accentuate the under eye area a bit as well, using a lighter shade of shadow to add some depth while brightening it up. For the area with dark circles and the aegyosal, instead of defining it sharply like you would for women, just blend the shadow and the lighter color together so it looks more diffused. It also looks pretty if you just add a subtle highlight to the outer corner with a slightly shimmery shadow. And I'll lightly fill in the lower waterline as well. Since the sharp inner corners of your eyes are so attractive, it's good to accentuate that.
And you're currently using a brown shade with a slight reddish tone. Since it's under the eyes, I want to emphasize it a bit more, but if it's too black or a deep brown, it can look too dark. So I'm adjusting it little by little with this shade.
For men, since they usually have less experience with makeup than women, it's common for clients to have trouble with it. So I'll hold it like this, and please look straight ahead. Then I just tell them to relax and look at themselves comfortably. And if you gently press down on the aegyosal here like this, the lower waterline drops a bit. If you lower it like this and draw, it goes on really well. This person is doing so well that I can't really use them as an example, but usually people have a hard time with this.
Since men generally have less experience with makeup than women, doing something under the eyes can feel quite intimidating. But if you lower the eyelid like the director does, it feels much more comfortable. So it's good to try different methods when doing makeup.
Your eyebrows are already so well groomed today, so I'll just tidy up a few stray hairs. I'll do it. There are just a few hairs that stick out when I brush them. You just need to pluck those out. If there's a slight gap in the shape of your eyebrows here, this area can look a bit raised in comparison. So even at the front, just one or two hairs, especially when grooming men's eyebrows. Men's eyebrow hairs are often a bit thicker than women's. So if you trim even just one or two hairs wrong, it can look like they're completely gone. You really have to trim just this one hair and only this one. Since this area looks sparse, if you trim it anymore, it'll look even more empty. So it's better to just fill it in here. This part feels a bit thinner and slightly longer, so I'll draw it to match the length of the other eyebrow.
And when I'm working on eyebrows, for example, if I'm drawing the top line of the brow, I always keep things like cotton swabs and a concealer brush or pencil handy, depending on the artist's style, so I can grab and use them right away. It's really convenient. But with cotton swabs, you pretty much need them for almost every step of the process. Even when you're applying skincare, if the eyes are dry, sometimes there can be some eye discharge. So it's best to always have cotton swabs on hand when you're assisting if possible. Of course, it might be different at each shop.
That's why, since we always keep them here while assisting, there are even people who keep carrying them around out of habit, even after they're done assisting. That's how important it is to make it a habit.
If you keep doing it, you'll probably find that it stays put here without falling off.
But when it comes to drawing eyebrows, I don't think men do it as neatly and sharply as women do. Of course, this varies with each makeup style, so you don't have to take it as the absolute answer. But should I say it ends with a slightly softer, more blended feel? The finishing touch. Personally, I think it looks prettier that way.
And right now, the very end of this eyebrow is a little bit sparser compared to the other side. I will now make a pencil that's almost black with a bit of gray, and then make the tail a bit more defined and prominent.
The model also has slightly elongated eyes, so instead of just a shadow, the end here is a bit blunt, and there's a bit of a dark circle as well. So it's good to cover that up well too. Otherwise, it might look like your eyeshadow has smudged.
So I'm not sure if you noticed, but when the director comes over to this side, it slightly recedes to the back. If you actually do makeup at a salon, the lighting is often very strong from both sides. So it's best to avoid blocking the lights. It's better to move in and out skillfully so that you don't end up missing a spot when you need to fill in your brows with shading. It's almost finished, but I think they're just cleaning up any smudges or fallout that happened while doing the eye.
When cleaning up under the eyes, you don't need to cover dark circles or imperfections too close to the aegiosal area. That's because for men, having this area look a bit wider overall gives a deeper impression.
So there's no need to brighten all the way up to the edges. When it comes to cream cover colors, if you use a shade that's too bright, it can actually make the area look more pronounced, almost like a bluish light.
Personally, I think that having defined cheekbone contours emphasizes masculinity in men. So I won't be applying shading from here all the way inward along the cheekbones. And right now, since I have someone helping me from the side, I haven't really checked the coverage here, but when you're doing it alone, you need to keep checking back and forth like this. Because honestly, when I'm just doing makeup from this angle, I often miss spots like this. You know, the pores next to your nose or the pimples that pop up in those areas, those are the kinds of things I end up missing. Because from here, I can only see about this much. So coming up close and checking is really the best way. And when you're dealing with slightly puffy looking eyes, it's good to blend the shading up to here, kind of neutralizing it together with the shadow. And as you probably know, for men, it's more attractive to have a nose that's high but a bit fuller rather than one that's too slim. So instead of contouring inward like you would for women, you just add a bit of shading here. For men as well, to effectively tone down any unwanted shine, I'll apply a bit more powder all over the entire face for an overall truly matte look. This is particularly important because if the skin is generally a bit thicker and more prone to breakouts, excess oil tends to come up much faster. So it's definitely best to finish with a more matte, powdery, and refined look. Now, to complete the process, I'll gently tone down the lips and then finish up the entire application.
We're almost done, so now I'll tidy up the hairline as well. Why bother fixing the hairline when you have bangs? You might think that, but honestly, you never know what might happen on stage or in any situation. At the salon, it's more important to make sure everything looks good even if the hair gets completely flipped back, so I'll tidy up the hairline a bit more.
This color looks really orange, doesn't it? But among men, a lot of them have darker skin, and honestly, there's a lot more blue undertone than you'd expect. If you just apply this color, it looks ridiculously orange. But if you put it on my veins, show them just once.
Okay.
When you touch it to your veins like this, it actually neutralizes the color. So after neutralizing the blue undertone like this, you lightly set it with powder and then gently layer the foundation you used on top. That way, beard coverage works really well. But for people with even darker skin, there will be even more blue undertones. In that case, there are actually colors as dark as this black. You just mix a tiny amount of this, little by little, like this. Doing it this way gives you really good coverage. You should never use a bright color for beard coverage, because if the color shifts, it really doesn't look good. It ends up looking like you're wearing a mask, kind of like that. That's really all you need to remember.
Personally, among my must-have items, I always keep a very dark, almost black-brown color. It's a brown-black shade that's really close to pure black. The Mitsuyoshi 21P is also very moisturizing and is a bright pink concealer, which is great for when you're doing female makeup. For male makeup or covering dark circles, there's the 29P, I think, which is an orange toned concealer. Since you mix this on a concealer palette, having an orange color on hand will be really useful.
And actually, in the past, makeup artists used to mix lipsticks a lot as well. I actually have something similar right now, so I took it out. It's this kind of color, this one. This is a lipstick, and if you mix it with concealer, it turns orange anyway. You can use it that way too. You don't absolutely have to buy a product. You can just use a lipstick or something you already have, but I buy the product since I use it anyway. Thank you for your hard work.